has uncovered many findings, and the team at Evergreen's own meticulous investigation will add to the details that will help in restoring the Red House to its former majesty.
Good morning. Apologies for the late start. But I thank you for your patience in bearing with us. I'd like to reconvene this meeting and welcome everyone here in the viewing and listening audience to the 11th public hearing of the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises. The purpose of this meeting is to continue the examination into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Education Facilities Companies Limited in managing the construction and repair of government and government-assisted schools, and to explore what may be some of the possible solutions to challenges being faced by the company. The role of this committee is firstly to examine the issues which arose based on EFCL's written responses to the committee's questions, and secondly, to help EFCL in improving its operations, resulting in a more efficient and effective organization. This meeting is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can participate by sending comments relating to today's engagement with the Educational Facilities Company Limited via email to parl101@ttparliament.org or via our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament or on Twitter @ttparliament. I'd like to welcome now the officials of EFCL, and I'd like to invite you to introduce yourselves.
Ricardo Vasquez, Chairman of the EFCL.
Dennis Cock, Acting CEO, EFCL.
Marvin Gonzalez, Director.
And I'd like to invite the representative of the Ministry of Finance to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Suzette Lichi, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance.
Thank you very much. I'd like to remind members that I'd ask all members to make sure their phones are either switched off or on vibrate or silent. And please remember to put on the mic whenever you want to make a contribution or respond to questions. I want to acknowledge that the committee has received the submissions from the EFCL, and I want to thank the officials for the written responses that have been received by the committee. And I would like now to ask officials present the Chairman of the EFCL to make any brief remarks before we dive right into the hearing. Mr. Vasquez, we would like to join the floor and make a brief opening comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, again, Mr. Small, and members of the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Permanent Secretary, Acting Ms. Suzette Leachy, in the Ministry of Finance and in the Ministry of Finance. Our team, Mr. Marvin Gonzalez, Director, Mr. Dennis Cox, Acting CEO of the Educational Facilities Limited, members of the media, and the viewing and listening audience. Firstly, I would like to give a brief overview of EFCL to place the foregoing deliberation in perspective. EFCL is wholly owned State Enterprises Limited, formed in 2005 under the Companies Act and with the corporation's sole Minister of Finance, its shareholder, and the Ministry of Education, its line ministry. The principal from an agency perspective, EFCL mandate is as a project manager and is responsible for the following: the constructions of schools at 3 education levels, ECCE, primary and secondary, repairs and maintenance of schools, outfitting and furnishing of schools, procurement of textbooks for the said schools. As project manager, EFCL receives formal instructions or authorizations from the Ministry of Education to embark on any project within its stated mandate. Through EFCL procurement tendering processes, contractors are sourced and engaged to undertake projects for and on behalf of the principal, the Ministry of Education, and by extension, the government and the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. With the change of administration in 2015, the board of EFCL was faced with a number of school constructions which were either suspended or terminated or left in the state of flux. Amongst owing to contractors and consultants, project manager, we were more than 750 million or 3/4 billion, and an audit firm, Pricewaterhouse, was asked to conduct valuation exercise to assess the validity of the amounts claimed by contractors. Following the PwC exercise, Cabinet was asked to authorize the change of use of existing fund, approximately 221 million, held by EFCL to pay valid claims, together with the consultancy and the associated costs. We continue to receive funding from the ministry to reduce these outstanding debts. In the last couple months, with the dramatic fall in prices of both the oil and gas, the government has found great difficulties in funding these school construction projects, which have various degrees of completion or non-completion. Notwithstanding, EFCL continues to work closely with the Ministry of Education in carrying out its mandate, especially to respond to critical areas to ensure that the school plans are kept in state of repair to prevent closure of schools and to facilitate the student learning. Further, EFCL project management fees are dependent on contractors' billings, hence non-payment to contractors directly impact on EFCL operation and its ability to maintain a cadre of core personnel. Finally, as chairman, I wish to assure you that EFCL team is present and ready to give clarity and explanations to this committee as the proceedings progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you very much, Mr. Vasquez, the chairman, in his urgency to proceed, I omitted to ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves. We know who you are. Let's make sure that you know who we are. So I'm going to ask the members on my right to introduce themselves, and then we'll go around the table.
Adrian Leons, member.
Fazal Karim, member.
Wade Mark, member.
Lester Henry, member and vice chairman of the committee.
And I'm David Smalley, chairman of the committee. And once again, I want to welcome you to this meeting. And this meeting is called for us to try to put in place and understand some of the things that have happened at EFCL in the past so that we could try to make recommendations to improve its performance going forward. Now, before I proceed directly into the questioning, the committee has agreed that I be allowed to make a comment on a couple of issues. There are two persons who have been invited to attend this meeting today, and they were not able to attend. We actually, as a member of this committee, as chairman of this committee, I noted in the newspaper very early this morning, I saw that one of those persons, the information that that person was not attending was in the press. But the actual documents was only received by this committee in terms of us seeing it, subsequent to that. And you know, the committee is challenged by that. The committee doesn't communicate its intentions in the public. That's not how we do business. It's not how we do things. So the committee is disappointed in the way in which the communication that you're not going to attend ended up in the newspaper, certainly before we saw it. So the committee is concerned about that, and it's not something we'd like to see happen again. But here's what. This committee is here to do work on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That's what we're here for. We're trying to understand how best to help. And the fact that we tried in our best endeavor to be courteous and respectful to everyone who appears before us, we were kind of hoping to get that back. That, you know, courtesy and respect is a two-way street. So that if you, our position is we give it and we're hopeful to get it back. That's how we do work here. So, but we also intend to be fair. So the committee wishes, in terms of persons not being able, for whatever reason, to be unable to attend the committee meetings, we view that those persons who have been invited who couldn't attend are critical for us to be able to get the work done. This is an expensive cost here of executive time around the table here to be here. And what you're seeing here, there's meetings that happen before we start this. So a lot of time goes into preparing for these meetings. And persons who are not able to attend, we want to make sure that we give every person every opportunity to attend and be able to share with us their views or comments on various things that have transpired or have been reported to this committee. So I want to draw members and all present and the public's attention to standing orders of the Senate. The committee has discussed this matter, and the committee intends to give yet another opportunity to those who could not attend to attend this committee to give their side or their version of or their story in terms of the things that have been presented to this committee. In the standing order of the Senate 102 at section 12, it says a committee may require by order that a summons be issued to any person to attend before that committee, to be examined and give evidence, and B, to produce papers and records in that person's possession, custody, or control to that committee. So when it says any person, it applies to any person, whether a current member of an entity or a previous member. So that it doesn't apply necessarily to persons who are current, only current, but it applies to any person that in the committee's view possesses important information that we'd like to hear that person's commentary on the information that's been presented. So this is the committee's intention to issue a summons under section 13, and it will be signed by the clerk on behalf of the House and served by the Marshal of the Parliament under the President's direction at least 7 days before this evidence is required. So this is the committee's way of saying in the past and for today, persons have not been able to attend for varying reasons. We don't want to replay the history, but what we're trying to get is to get to the facts. We have a documentation supplied to us. We would like to hear the oral evidence that allows us to be able to come to an informed conclusion or allow us to have an informed position. And we can only do that if persons who have been invited choose to appear And in this way, the committee is going to give them yet another opportunity. The date, they will be duly informed of the date, but this is a procedure under the standing orders, and the committee intends to try to see if we could encourage them to come join us, sit in the wonderful room here, and let's have a discussion about what some of the things that have been reported about the EFCL or have transpired at EFCL so that people can be properly informed. That's what this is about. This is part of our democratic process, and the committee is very, very married to that. This is part of our democratic process. Persons who are in charge of state resources at any time have the obligation. Citizens should demand that they be accountable. You can't want to sit in a place where you're controlling hundreds of millions of dollars of state resources, and then when you're asked to come before, we would at least like to hear your side. That's all we're trying to get at. And if we don't have your side, then our work is going to be difficult. And we're trying to make our work not as difficult as we go forward. So I'd like to move on. So once again, I'd like to welcome everyone who has appeared. And I want to go. Yes. I want to go to Madam Permanent Secretary, P.S. Leachy. Good morning. A special welcome to you. I know you're a very busy lady. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come and sit with us today. Now, I'm going to go straight to it because the committee is aware that this is the third hearing I believe we're having with EFCL. So there's a lot of background things that have happened before. I would like you, Madam Permanent Secretary, could you confirm for this committee the receipt of a report from the General Manager, Mr. Cox of EFCL, regarding issues regarding the operations of members of the board of EFCL? Could you confirm that such a document was received by you?
Yes, I did receive a letter from Mr. Cox outlining some matters.
Around, could you give us a date or an estimate of when you received?
It would have been early November 2016. I believe it was the 3rd of November 2016.
Early November 2016. Could you answer for this committee and for the public's general information? Could you inform whether members of the former board of EFCL were non-executive directors?
Well, I am not generally responsible for the state enterprises, so I will not be able to confirm whether the status of the board of directors at that point in time, but I can get that information to you subsequently.
Yes, because what we're getting at, Madam Permanent Secretary, is that directors, it is our understanding, committee's understanding, that the members of boards of state companies are non-executive directors. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that is my understanding.
Good. And for clarity, in terms of being a non-executive director, how would you, as a member of as a permanent secretary, expect that a non-executive director, whether chairman or vice chairman or otherwise, in terms of how they interact with the management of the entity, how would you describe, would you like to say or describe that relationship between non-executive members of the board and you have a full executive team running the company?
Well, my understanding is a board of directors is focused on the strategic objectives of the corporation, and there is a link between the board and the staff, normally through the corporate secretary to the board, and any other officers of the staff that would be that would attend board meetings from time to time. So there is a link, but it's a formalized link, and it's very structured.
Madam Permanent Secretary, would you be able to, I'm going to make a statement and you'll give me whether you agree or disagree with my statement. Members of the board of any entity are not supposed to be directly involved in the day-to-day operations of the running of the entity.
Yes, I can confirm that is so.
And the chairman has been deliberately pedantic here because this is something that I want to get lucidly clear, because perhaps some of the things that have happened, not only at the EFCL, but are probably going on in other places, members of the board of directors are not supposed to be involved in the day-to-day running of the business. They are not supposed to be there from 8 to 4, 9 to 5, issuing instructions to managers. That is my understanding. I just want to get from, and I'm happy that the Permanent Secretary confirms it. So, Permanent Secretary, if you, as Permanent Secretary, receive a report that that perhaps members of the board are overstepping their boundaries and are in fact, issuing instructions to managers or directly interfacing in negotiations. How would you treat with that, Madam Permanent Secretary?
Right. Well, we do have a structure within the Ministry of Finance to treat with matters such as those. Firstly, you would have to bring into the attention of the Minister of Finance as corporation sole, and then the Ministry of Finance, through the investment division, has structures in place to investigate matters such as these, which is the Central Audit Committee, which I can confirm have been investigating the EFCL. They've completed their field work, and they're in the process of finalizing a report on EFCL.
So I'm circling back, Madam Permanent Secretary. In the report, in the letter to you by Mr. Cox, early November, did Mr. Cox's letter identify any matters that demonstrated a crossing of the line by these non-executive directors?
Yes, he did. I can categorize the complaints in 4
Thank you so much, because that was my next question, so I appreciate that.
All right, so it was situations of the board encroaching on the responsibilities of the staff of the EFCL. There were situations where the board approved unqualified personnel for appointments. There was improprieties in the procurement process, and there were situations where board members were abusing the resources of the EFCL and using these resources for their personal purposes. That's the broad categorization.
Could you, Madam Permanent Secretary, yes, just like go through your list again one more time? Let me just get it, because these are serious allegations. Yes. So that could you just be able? Could you, Chair, could the chairman just repeat that list again?
Situations of the board encroaching on the responsibilities of the staff of the EFCL. That would be what you were alluding to earlier. Situations where the board would have approved unqualified personnel for appointments, which I think it's related to the first point. Improprieties in the procurement process, and situations where the board members were abusing the resources of the EFCL for personal purposes.
Madam Permanent Secretary, the obvious next question is, when you were faced with these statements or these allegations made in a letter from the chairman, how did the ministry team respond?
Okay, am I permitted to bring a little perspective before
Certainly.
Answering? Okay, so I am one of 4 permanent secretaries in the Ministry of Finance, and normally my responsibilities as it relates to EFCL would be limited to EFCL's borrowing portfolio, specifically their government guaranteed borrowing portfolio. At the time of this particular incident, the senior permanent secretary, who is the one with overall responsibility for all matters related to the Ministry of Finance, was out of the country on government business, and I was acting in that capacity. In addition, I believe the permanent secretary with responsibility for state enterprises was also not available. So on the date in question, an officer from the investment division would have brought 4 officers of the EFCL, including the CEO, to my office, and that is when the officers proceeded to relate to me a number of irregularities of the board. During the course of the meeting, I felt that it was matters that maybe we should address directly with the minister. The minister, unfortunately, was not in office at the time. So the decision was made that the matters raised would be put in a letter that we would subsequently address at the Ministry of Finance. The letter was provided, I think, the same afternoon, and I eventually raised the issue with the Minister of Finance. Was advised of the issues that there was an awareness of the issues at EFCL at the Ministry of Finance, but not being my normal area of activity in the ministry, I wasn't aware. So, and that there was a meeting of the board scheduled at some time prior to that. When the substantive PS returned, shortly thereafter, I would have briefed him on the issue, and essentially that ended my responsibility for the oversight of this matter. The Ministry of Finance, I subsequently learned that the Ministry of Finance's Central Audit Committee was asked to investigate. They have completed their field work and is in the process of finalizing their report on the matter.
Madam Permanent Secretary, I appreciate the fullness of your response. I did not expect anything less, and I am pleased, the committee is pleased with the fullness of your response, because we want to try to get at the heart of what the issues are so that we could try to make sure we fix it to prevent these types of things from happening. And some of those things you mentioned, in particular, the issues around things that occurred within the tendering process are particular interest to this committee. This committee is in receipt of many reams of documentation showing on the company's letterhead some unusual occurrences. The speed at which the EFCL board at that time seemed to operate was amazing. The speed at which the board operated in terms of approving tenders for some issues. And we would just like to try to understand why on some issues it seemed that they were able to turn tenders over in a day, and then some took months. So that these are the things that the committee is trying to get at. But I will reserve my questions for now. I will give you the floor to MP Karim. MP Karim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Permanent Secretary, you indicated that there were some irregularities that were identified subject to the letter from Mr. Cox. And the chairman, in his opening remarks, stated that there were some PwC was conducting some valuation exercises to ascertain the value of the contracts. Mr. Chairman or Permanent Secretary, well, I think I'll address it to the chairman first. Can you say whether there were any irregularities found in that PwC exercise in terms of the verification of contracts that were awarded? And if so, could you give us some details of it?
Committee member, Mr. Karim, through the chair, I just wanted to outline what PwC conducted, but pertaining to the report, I was not privy to the report.
Well, can you say what is the status of this report? Where is it? Is it completed? In whose hands is this report?
Well, the report is at the Attorney General at this time.
And from your knowledge, has there been any concern with respect to the veracity of the claims?
At this point in time, most of the claims are within our legal department.
As chairman of the company, can you say that there's a concern with respect to some of these claims that would have been presented for payment?
At this stage, I prefer not to comment on that particular subject at this point in time, because there are ongoing matters in the court right now, and arbitration. Since
your opening remarks and the last time we met, can you say what is the outstanding liabilities? You indicated you gave some figures here, but I'd like you to restate what are the liabilities owed to contractors, and since we last met, how much has been paid and what is still outstanding?
This present time, I can't give you the exact figures, but we did submit to the joint committee at that point in time something in the vicinity of $765 million. However, in the last month or two, well, I shouldn't even say last month, within the last month, we have been getting some releases. So we don't have that reconciliation at this point in time to give you. But there have been a substantial amount reducing that present figure.
If you had to identify, I'm saying top in the context of the largest amounts, 5 contractors, could you tell us some of those and the amounts outstanding? Because people have been clamoring both in terms of, I'm sure, communicating with you and in the public domain about the impact of these non-payments of contract sums to their operations. So can you give us a sense as to what are these kind of figures that are outstanding to some of the major suppliers?
Presently, we're in litigation with one contractor who was given almost 58 contracts amounting to close to $900 and something million in excess. We have other contractors. So overall, our litigation situation is about $1.2 billion at this present time. And we are trying our best to see how best we could manage that situation.
Since 2015, let's say October, could you indicate to the committee how many selective tendering or sole select tenders have been awarded contracts?
I can't really give you that information.
Did you have any instances such as those?
I can only speak on what I have been privy to in the last few months, which would be 2017. And we probably had just a few, because most of it would be under the repair and maintenance program, because we didn't have any major new construction within that last few months. Everything else would have been before my time.
Okay, so can you say within the last 2 years, how much such monies have been owed to persons based on those selective or sole select tendering, whether it's for maintenance or repairs or whatever it is?
I can't answer that off the bat.
Will you be in a position to tell the committee for the last 2 years whether any construction of any school or schools have been undertaken and completed? The value?
Well, we have a construction that we undertook, but it's not completed as yet, and that would be with the THA at this point in time.
Are you in a position to tell us the status of the Belmont Primary, Rose Hill Primary, and Point Commander Primary schools in terms of their status of completion? And there seems to be a differentiation between the original price and the completed price. Can you say whether that is so, and if you can give us some details, please?
Is it possible I could pass that question on to Mr. Cox?
Good morning again to the chairman and members of the committee. With respect to Belmont, the school is practically complete. However, we have not completed in terms of the final accounts from the contractor.
Might you be able to say what was the original tendered price and what it appears to be at this point in time?
We are waiting the final accounts from the contractor, which will give us an idea of the final position in terms of costing.
What would have been the original price?
I don't have that figure right now, but I can provide those information to you.
Can you tell us about the other two schools I asked?
The other two schools, I don't have the information right now, but I know they are in a state of incompletion. And we also have to do final accounts based on the fact that these are either suspended or terminated.
By what time
the contractor
you
will have to do the final.
By what time you estimate that these will come to completion and you'll have the final accounts?
I cannot say at this point in time. However, I can speak with my technical team and we can get a report on those.
All right, with respect to school construction, could you tell us how many incompleted schools, as a result of their incompletion, are now using denominational boards premises, whether it's a mosque, a temple, or a church, or even a civic building? Could you tell us how many of those are on shift as well as a result of this construction activity?
Yeah, as you mentioned, in terms of incompletion, we have a situation in Londonville where we have to, well, to the Ministry of Education, they have to reassign the student to other premises. And the Ministry of Education has identified the Londonville Community Center, which through EFCL, we have reconfigured, to accommodate the student of the Londonville School.
Is that the only one that you can recall?
Presently, yes. There also a situation of Siparia Union, which was affected recently by a fire. We also have to reassign or relocate the student until such time EFCL has complete the renovation work. There's also a school under construction there which has been suspended, which we cannot address at this point in time.
Which school is this? Which school is this?
Siparia Union Presbyterian, I think it is.
What's the status of the Reform Hindu School, the Arima Hindu School, and the Princeton East Secondary School? You said that there are a few that you could remember, but there are some more that I can recall.
I'm not too familiar with those two, but I can investigate.
Perhaps you could request those in writing.
Yeah, if you can give us a full list of those schools that are using denominational board properties, whether, as I indicated, and what's the status of the completion of the school, and when do you expect them to be fully utilized? And I give examples like the Arima Hindu School, the Reform Hindu School. I know there were some electrical issues in Princeton, and there are a number of other schools, but you will be in a better position than I am in to list those schools. And also, I would like to have the original tender price of the 3 schools I asked about, and as soon as you have the final completion price, we'd like to know what that variation is. In addition to which, we'd like to know whether there were any concerns from PwC as early as we can with respect to the veracity or the ascertaining the value that were claimed.
To the Chair, Member Karim, I'll provide the information in writing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, MP Karim. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Cox. Mr. Cox, in your submission of October the 24th, the most recent submission, we noted a large amount of legal matters. I have almost $150 million in arbitration claims. I have almost $100 million in the way a default judgment was issued against EFCL. I want to just understand, because this is taxpayers' money. So what happens that causes EFCL to have someone makes a claim and there's a default judgment issued against EFCL? What happened? And I'm not asking any particular issue, but in general, what could cause this?
To the Chair, recently we are faced with, we're bombarded with a number of claims, and in some cases we identify where the claimant, the contractor through his attorneys, they had filed motion against EFCL without consulting with our legal counsel. And unfortunately, judgment were given in favor of the claimant. EFCL took the position to ask for that the judgment be set aside and that we be given time to make representation on behalf of EFCL on those claims.
But I have to interject. I'm struggling. If a party files a suit against EFCL, given the speed at which the normal judicial process operates in Trinidad and Tobago, how do we get it? Is it not that the company would have been communicated that there's a matter against you in the court? Because what you're suggesting to this committee is that files were claimed, you didn't know about it, and by the time you hear about it, it's because a default judgment has been given. And then you're trying now to claw back that by asking for more time and having asking for the judgment to be put aside. But I am going back a couple of steps. If a company files an action against EFCL, is it that you never find out about it?
To the Chair, there were cases, specific cases where during the transition period where we had the resignation of the corporate sec, senior legal officer, and the appointment of a temporary corp sec, we had certain correspondence being delivered in quotes to EFCL, which we had no record of. And I think that was critical in one of the judgment where the information was sent to the corporate sec and named corporate sec, And we were not in a position to be given notice or to respond to such situation, and judgment were given against EFCL. You know, it is if I would say, it is curious in that these judgments or these issues were deliberated in such short space of time that if that precedent were to be followed, the courts in Trinidad and Tobago.
I want to stop you there, Mr. Cox. I want to stop you there. I want to protect you, and I also want to make sure that we all have our views on it, but I would like to stop you from going down that road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So that, let me be clear, the arbitration matters. I want to understand, it's a lot of money here. I want to ask a question, Mr. Cox. The committee has some information before it that some of those claims arise from contracts that have been awarded. So the company has gone through the tender process and has identified a contract being awarded, but the contractor is not able to start work, and some of the reasons include that there's problems with the actual site being available. And then, so I need to understand, if the site is not available, why is the company awarding the contract? The company should not award the contract in our logic before the site is fully available. And then the other element of that, there's an accumulation of costs because the contractor is claiming or whatever, the site is not available. I would like you to tell this committee what type of costs that the companies are claiming. We are seeing numbers in the $25,000 a day range for companies saying the site is not available. We have costs, and we are claiming $25,000 TT a day from EFCL Monday to Sunday. So I want you to help us with that, because that is serious. So the first issue is contracts being awarded before the site is ready, and then in the instances when it occurs, what type of range of costs are these companies now saying that EFCL owes them?
Chairman, to answer your first question, I was not at the time engaged with EFCL. And for the second question, with respect to the second question, the issue of the model used in terms of EFCL, the financial model. EFCL over the years is operated with funding by way of a bond initially, a $400 million bond, and later a bridging loan of $285 million, I think, thereabout. And there was the fund there that is existing, and then EFCL will get instruction from the Ministry of Education or Line Ministry to undertake or to embark on certain projects, construction projects in particular. However, over time, these funds had been exhausted in terms of trying to manage. We were looking at about 108, construction of 108 schools. The average in terms of the quantum, it ranged from $45 million to $120 million per school, depending on the physical space. With that original model, where you have the fund in your bank account, we, EFCL, was in a position to contract with those contractors and execute accordingly. However, over time, with the exhaustion of those funds, EFCL, well, when I say those funds, especially the $400 million bond, EFCL found itself entering into contract without fund monies in the bank, and that led to a number of issues in that when the contractor, based on the letter of award, we make requests for payment or advances, there was no fund available. And we found ourselves, as the chairman indicated in his opening remark, that the downturn of the economy, the sudden downturn of the economy, impacted negatively in terms of our ability to fund, or the ability of the Ministry of Education to release funding for EFCL to continue those projects.
So, Mr. Cox, what you're saying in the short version of what you just said is that the company awarded contracts and they didn't have money in the bank to start paying. So yes, I just take it back a step. Couldn't someone make sure that money was in the account before the contract was awarded? Because this is simple business logic. You're awarding a contract, and then what you're saying, what transpired, the short version, what you've just said is that we award contracts, and then we don't have the money to start the contract, and the contractors are of course, billing us. So all I'm saying, go back a couple of steps. Before you award the contract, there should be at least a verification step. We award a contract for $5 million. Do we have money left after all of the other contracts? That seems to be pure business logic. So you've helped the committee with one of its recommendations in terms of how we treated that going forward if you haven't already fixed that already. All right, let me stop there. The chairman has a few questions, but I want to give other members the opportunity to join in. I have Senator Mark, who's requested the floor. Senator Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to everyone. Madam Permanent Secretary, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions for my own clarification. Could you tell us what's the name of the Permanent Secretary that is responsible for state enterprises within the Ministry of Finance?
Currently, it is Ms. Lisa Phillips, but she's due to retire soon, so it most likely will be Mrs. Michelle Durham-Kissoon after December 1st.
Okay, thank you. I just also wanted to ask you, in your earlier submission, you said that this letter that was sent by Mr. Cox, which you happen to have received because of certain circumstances, would have been raised with the Minister of Finance. Would you care to share with us when that was raised? What day?
Well, I believe it was raised the very same afternoon that I received the letter.
Right. And could you tell us what was the minister's response?
Well, as I indicated, his response was that he was aware that there were questions at EFCL and that the matter was being addressed. And essentially that was it.
Okay.
And there was to be a meeting of the board at some point in time.
Now,
with the board.
From my estimation, it is now 5 months since we were informed that the Central Audit Committee had begun its inquiry into procurement, human resource management, and governing practices at the EFCL. Could you indicate to us when you anticipate a final report to be submitted to the minister?
I will be unable to give a specific date, but I can, as I said earlier, the fieldwork has been completed and the committee is drafting a report. I can subsequently provide an estimated date by which the report is due to be completed, but I don't have that with me right now.
Do you believe, from your understanding of the Central Audit Committee's activities, that that committee is under-resourced and undermanned from your perspective? And if so, what would be your recommendation to strengthen that Central Audit Committee?
Well, not having direct responsibility for the Central Audit Committee, I wouldn't be able to give a comprehensive response to that question, but I can say that I am aware that they are understaffed. I believe that there have been moves to strengthen the unit, but I won't be able to give you the details of that. And that too I can supply subsequently.
Now, the effective monitoring of the state enterprise sector would be the responsibility of that permanent secretary that you mentioned.
Yes.
And that person is not available at this time and is about to retire. And therefore, you would not be in a position to shed light on the role of that division in monitoring, let's say, a state enterprise like EFCL.
No, I won't be able to provide any significant details on that.
You know about the state enterprises performance manual?
Yes, I do.
Do you think that that manual, which provides some good, positive, excellent guidelines to state enterprises. Do you think that document, the time has arrived for it to be translated into a legally binding document? Do you think that the time has come for it?
Yes, personally, I believe, yes.
And do you think that we should attach appropriate penalties for flouting and violating that those guidelines, which would then be legal?
Yes, I do.
Right. May I turn, Mr. Chairman, briefly to the chairman of the committee, Mr. Ricardo Velasquez, I think. Yes, Vasquez. Yes, thank you. Mr. Vasquez, I just wanted to ask whether we are in possession of a report dated August 14, 2017. Which made a lot of serious allegations against a former assistant manager. Could you tell us if you are in receipt of such a report?
Through the chair.
It was written by a concerned citizen, 52 pages long, and addressed to you.
I have no idea about that report, so sorry.
You have no idea of that report? Okay. May I also ask the following question? In your submission dated June 13th, 2017, the committee noted the following findings by PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I want to quote what it was stated in that report. It should be noted that the Public Services Negotiations Committee is responsible for setting and approving executive management compensation. However, the actual salaries are not within the approved compensation structure and was approved at the board level. Could you tell us, committee, whether the salaries have returned to a level that adheres to the approved compensation structure that would have been approved by the board prior?
Through the chair, Senator Mark, I will have to make some checks on that.
You're not sure?
I'm not sure, no.
Could you indicate whether the practice of the board of approving salaries without the approval of the Public Services Negotiations Committee would have discontinued, or would have been discontinued, I should say?
Well, I can assure you that nothing of that nature ever reached the board, put it into salaries or negotiating salaries at this present time.
And if it were to reach your board, what would be the stance taken by your board if that were to happen? Would you follow the procedures that PricewaterhouseCoopers outlined, consistent with the body that is responsible for certain terms and conditions, which is the Public Sector Negotiations Committee?
I would most definitely say yes. You know, we would follow any guidelines that is outlined by PwC report. Well, as I said before, we don't get involved. Management, normally the ones who get involved when it comes to salary negotiations and stuff like that.
Well, as you know, the chairman did indicate that prior to your arrival in the chair that you now occupy, I think you were the deputy chairman prior to that. And the EFCL took decisions under your watch when you were vice chairman that completely violated and breached standing, well-established practice in the public service as it relates to how people should be compensated in terms of salary increases. There was other favoritism, as you are aware. So that is why I'm asking the question. Having regard to that experience, where the board apparently directed management to do certain things, whether that practice under your leadership will be discontinued. That is the question I'm asking.
Yes.
And may I also ask, Mr. Chairman, through you, through the chair, is there a whistleblowing policy within the EFCL, or is there intention on the EFCL to have such a policy established?
Well, at board level, yes, we are discussing that whistleblowing policy, but it's still in the early stages.
Do you have any idea when it would be completed?
Not at this time, because we have so many different things that we also moving along very quickly with to get as part of our policy, which is our strategic plan. There are many things that was not the focus of the past board, and we are now trying to restructure and make it, the right way forward.
Mr. Chairman, my final question for this round. Do you have a strategic plan? And if you don't, how soon would you embark upon such a document? And if you have begun that exercise, could you indicate to this committee what is the time frame for its completion and ultimate approval? And once that is done, would you be kind enough to make a copy available to the secretary of our committee?
Well, I hope this answers all aspects of your question. We are in the selection process, and we're hoping that maybe by early January, we should be able to be starting that process in the organization.
What's the selection process, Mr. Chairman? Through you, Mr. Chairman. Are you talking about a consultancy that you are going to establish?
Yes.
Do we not have the competencies and the talent and ability within the managerial structure of that organization to fuel such a plan? Why do we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultancy to establish and to formulate a plan when that is the responsibility of the management? Do you think we still have a paucity of managerial talent within the EFCL?
Well, to answer your question, we just want to do what we think is right, the best practice. Yes, we do have great talent within the EFCL, and they are also contributing towards the strategic plan. Yes, that's it for now.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Senator Henry.
I don't have much, but because I have to leave in a few minutes, but I just want to clarify. You said one contractor got as much as 58 contracts in one of your comments. I was just trying to clarify and the sum had total about 900,000, if I heard you correctly. And that led me to one of the questions that arose out of your last submission in terms of the splitting of contracts into small amounts so that it remained at the management, what do you call it? At the management level. Could you clarify the information first and then explain what has been done to stop that, if anything, from happening?
Through the chair, Sir Henry. We, first to begin, is 900 million, not 900,000. That's the first and foremost. Second, most of these contracts was inherited in this new board term, this new administration term. So we don't know what was the policy then, how they went about awarding contracts. But it seemed it was not, well, of course it was not the policy or the practice in the past of EFCL in awarding contracts. Hence the reason why there was so much controversies and situations where PwC had to be stepped in to do verification and validations and stuff like that. So that practice no longer exists in the sense of we get, as I said in my opening remarks, we get approvals from the Ministry of Education to go forward on any particular contract. So without approvals, we don't enter in any tendering process or anything else.
And that is for all contracts, not above a certain amount?
No, that's for all contracts, yeah.
Thank you, Senator Henry. Now, I want to address the chairman, Mr. Vasquez. Mr. Vasquez, at the beginning of this hearing, I posed some questions to the permanent secretary regarding the way in which the board is expected to interact with the management. So I'd just like to get your confirmation or tell me whether my comment is correct or incorrect. Would it be a correct statement to say that the current members of the board are operating professionally and don't give directions to the current management of EFCL in terms of the day-to-day operations?
Presently, the other members of the board does not interface with the day-to-day operations of EFCL.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cox, given your very early letter to the permanent secretary indicating very, very serious allegations or statements or recollections of experiences regarding the way in which the previous board had been conducting themselves, your experience from then to now, could you help us with your experience from then to now?
Chairman?
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I need a response.
Chairman, there has been vast improvement in terms of the relationship between the board and the management team, and also staff. If you want to permit me, in terms of the letter to the PS, that letter really wasn't meant to be placed in the public domain. It was a situation which I felt should have been treated within the confines of the Ministry of Finance, and that matter would have been resolved within the confines of the Ministry of Finance Corporation. So, however, I mean, it's a done situation. And,
thank you, Mr. Cox. The good picture that you are, we appreciate your response. I want to lay out a situation and I want a response from the permanent secretary. Madam Permanent Secretary, if I were to relate to you, as some documentation provided to this committee suggests, that the previous board of EFCL for a particular tender, put out the tender, completed the tender exercise. At the end of the tender exercise, the party to whom the contract was to be awarded was, the board took a decision not to award it to that company and decided to award it to another company. Now, here's the challenge that I have, because the company has documentation for which we really are struggling to understand how bad things are. So you had a public tender, the companies that tendered would have tendered. On one day, a few days after the board took the decision not to give the contract to the company that won the tender, another company, probably the same 58th contract company, submitted a document with a tender for the same contract. On day one, let's call it the 5th of March, just for being pedantic. So on the 5th of March, the company, after the tender would have closed, let's say the end of February or the middle of February. And the board, the next day on March 6th, the board issued a letter of award of the same tender to that company. So you have a situation where a public tender went through the entire process. The company that was successful on the basis of the evaluation wasn't given the tender. Another company submitted a letter saying that here's my tender, and then 24 hours later, they receive a letter of award of the contract. Would you consider that set of circumstances to be very disturbing?
Yes, most certainly.
And it gets worse, Madam Permanent Secretary. That is just, I mean, this is what the committee is struggling with. When you look at the documentation provided to this committee by a good concerned citizen, another patriot, Mr. Cox, not you, but another patriot, the documentation suggests that the board, in approving the tender award, approved the tender award for a sum, whatever the sum is, inclusive of VAT and contingencies. But when you look at the letter, the submission from the contractor's is, forgive me, exclusive of that. But the contractor's submission is inclusive of, so that if it's $3 million, the contractor says it's going to cost $3 million, all inclusive. The company's award letter says $3 million exclusive of VAT and contingencies. So something is wrong. Something has gone radically wrong. And for the committee, it is deeply troubling that while on another level, we can say that a company able to turn around a tender process in 24 hours is amazing. You can probably take the positive from that. But the negative inference there is serious, because you have a company submitting a tender on one day and then getting a letter of award on the next day. And I'm not going to call the name of the company, because these are things that the company is still trying to understand. And this is just one of many contained in a 52-page letter to the committee about things that have happened at EFCL. And in the work that PwC has done or has completed doing, I want to understand from Mr. Cox and Mr. Vasquez, in terms of the work, did they look at the company's history of how it awarded tenders? I know you don't have the report, but they certainly would have interfaced with your company in terms of what they were looking for. Because instances like this would easily jump out at anyone. A contract being awarded one day after the letter of submission of the tender was submitted. And it's not for insignificant money. So I just want to understand from Mr. Vasquez and or Mr. Cox, in terms of the work that PwC has engaged themselves in or completed, did they look at the company's history of award of tenders in terms of the tender procedures, and whether there was any breach of the tenders rules? Would anyone be able to comment?
Through the chair, I will attempt to answer the question. Yes, in fact, in terms of the audit process, they would have engaged the procurement division, they would have engaged the technical division, and also the finance division in terms of trying to gather audit evidence so that they can, draw their conclusion thereon. So in fact, in principle, in terms of the process or the processes or the methodology used by the auditors, they should have been, they should have engaged the procurement process, the technical process, and accounting process in terms of coming to a conclusion.
Would that have included the work of the Board Tenders Committee?
Yes.
That is critical. Madam Permanent Secretary, in terms of the work that the Central Audit Committee is doing, or are you aware whether or not their work includes a look at the way in which the company has gone through its tendering process, particularly activities at the Board Tenders Committee, where some things seem to have not happened in a good way? Are you aware whether or not part of their remit was to look at the way in which the company is awarding tenders?
I won't be able to confirm specifically, but I expect that that was part of their remit.
For this committee's information, could you at least provide to this committee what is the terms of reference?
Yes.
Of what the committee, of Central Audit Committee, is looking at, so we can understand, because these are deeply, deeply, deeply troubling activities, and these are things that we have on EFCL's headed paper and on the company in question's headed paper. And when you look at the dates are just amazing. Some things have happened that are not, while we would all be happy to see things happen quickly in the civil service or in state entities, when things happen this quickly, I think more questions arise from it. I want to stop there. I have a few more questions, but I want to give another member the floor. MP Leons, you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. You addressed some of my questions. Just going back, either the CEO or the chairman could answer. Just to be clear, you said that you all are going to hire a consultant. Is this consultant to do a strategic plan?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I probably could elaborate a little bit there. We had invited tenders for persons, a public tender, for consultant to respond to a request for, a firm to conduct the strategic planning process and to prepare the strategic plan of EFCL. We received a number of responses, and we are in the process of evaluating and selecting a consultant.
In your tendering process, when is this person expected to start, and what is their deliverable you expect that they would be able to deliver this strategic plan?
Okay, from our advertisement or our notice, we had indicated to consultant, I think, to indicate the time frame in which they would complete the exercise. That was a critical element of the proposal. I haven't seen the documentation per se, but I know the technical evaluation was completed. We had about 11 firms' proposals that we had evaluated, and we have shortlisted 9. In other words, 9 of the consultants has meet our qualifying criteria. Okay. In terms of the time frame, we expect to do the the financial evaluation within the next 2 weeks, and by January 1st, we should be in a position to have January 2nd, we should be able to have the procurement, the process, strategic planning process initiated or started.
Okay. Has there been a dedicated fund put aside for this process?
We haven't set aside a fund as yet because we are looking at we are opening the financial package. We look at the technical package, now we're going to open the financial package. So we have an idea of what these guys are proposing to charge or the cost. So when we complete that second stage, we will be in a position to make submission to the board to set aside the fund to meet the cost of the strategic plan.
But isn't there some anticipation of what you would expect to pay for this strat plan?
In our budgeting process, we had identified a sum, but we would only know whether it's realistic in terms of the actual amount when we open the bids.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just one last question. In lieu of the strat plan, what is the current structural arrangements for operations based on the deficiencies that you would have indicated in your last submission?
Through the Chair, I just want to inform the committee that recently the board has taken a decision to restructure the organization and to reclassify positions in the organization. That is one of the recommendations coming out of the Pricewaterhouse report on HR management. We are also looking at the other 3 Pricewaterhouse reports, which give recommendation for the board to implement in terms of going forward. These recommendations, they form the framework in which we're going to use in terms of our strategic plan. Okay? So we can use the recommendation of the Pricewaterhouse reports, to more or less to chart the way forward in terms of our operation and make it more efficient and effective. While at the same time, we have the strategic plan process taking place, so we can document and consolidate in terms of the way forward or the roadmap to take us where we're supposed to be.
Okay, the proposed org structure, is there new positions? Because also in your last submission, you indicated some vacancies that may have disrupted or reduced your efficiency in terms of operation. Is the org structure you're speaking about from the Price Waterhouse report? And if yes, has that structure been fully populated?
Okay, through the chair. The new organization chart has been confirmed by the board at the last meeting, and one of the recommendations coming out of the Price Waterhouse report and further validated at the last joint select committee session was to have an internal audit function. And we have, in fact, introduced a senior internal auditor and an internal auditor in the new chart, so that we'll have a functioning internal audit, to have the internal audit function effected. We also have introduced general manager support, so that we can have a general manager managing the human resource, information communication technology function, and also the facilities management function. We also look at creating a general manager position to manage the technical function, which currently has a number of senior project managers and project managers. So we'd have a general manager overseeing that function. We also look futuristic in terms of creating a marketing and a communication specialist function, so that in terms of treating with the mandate of EFCL, we may have to broaden the mandate, which would seek the permission of the Ministry of Finance and also the Ministry of Education, in terms of widening the mandate for EFCL in order to create new streams of revenue. Finally, in the chart, we also look at the procurement manager or procurement officer, which would be aligned with the new Procurement Act, so that we'll have a specific person treating with procurement to conform with the Act. I think the Act used the term procurement officer. But because we currently have procurement officers at the lower level in the organization, in the procurement department, we'll have to tweak with that at the time, when the Procurement Act is proclaimed.
Are all those positions you just indicated filled?
The answer is no, and we have vacancies in terms of internal audit. We have vacancies in terms of legal. We have sent out invitation, advertisement for recently to recruits to fill these positions. Yeah.
That's the last question, Chair, sorry. When do we expect the full complement based on your plan for a strong structure? When do you expect to have these positions filled?
We can project the filling of these vacancies, I would say February, March 2018.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, MP Leons. I now give the floor to MP Karam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, can you just share with us, you mentioned this in the beginning, but I just want to get it very clear. How many contractors have sued the EFCL, and for what sums of money in totality, and when did this suit begin, the litigation?
Through the chair, Senator Karim, would it be, or MP, would it be possible that I could get this information back to the committee in detail? I could just give you an...
if you can give us an idea as to how many contractors and a ballpark figure, so that we get a sense as to the indebtedness.
As I said, it's roughly probably about $1.2 billion.
And how many contractors that will amount to, who are suing for $1.2 billion?
It could be roughly about 20 contractors.
Okay, so 20 contractors approximately suing the EFCL for the outstanding amount of $1.2 billion that have not been paid to them for work that were completed.
Not work that has been completed, work that have been suspended, and as I said, some of it might be controversial.
Some of it might be controversial. And is that with respect to the PwC verification exercise as well?
Not really. It would be based on our findings through the legal aspect of it.
Are you able to share any of those findings with us?
Well, I don't have all the details with me, but
But if you could give us an idea of what might have caused you your concern with some of those claims.
Well, some of the claims would have been jobs incomplete, and but they're suing for the full amount, and some jobs never started, and so we're, as I said, we're in arbitration with a lot of information at this point in time. And we are trying our best to manage the situation.
Do you have a situation where contractors are on site and continue to ramp up bills for which they are suing you as well? No work is being done, but they're on site. Do you have a situation like that?
I can't give you that specific details, but I'm sure that there are some jobs that are suspended, and there's a possibility that there is some form of security and other things that pertain to those sites.
Okay, let me ask you, I want to go on quickly to two other things. The EFCL, have you been involved in any technology-based project in these schools? In terms of, and I'm using it broad-based, not necessarily in terms of the laptop and the computer rooms and labs. Have you secured a provider of service for any technology-based project in schools? And if so, what is the value of that? And have these people or this provider been paid? Is there an outstanding sum? Can you tell us about that project?
To the chair, I will attempt to answer the question. In recent time, I was made aware that there was a project embarked by one of the service provider, telecommunication service provider, to...
Is this TSTT?
No.
Oh.
Right, another provider.
Oh, because you said telecommunications. Okay, the provider.
Yeah, not TSTT.
All right,
and that project, we don't have the information in terms of... I know it never got off the ground. And right now we are looking to gather data in terms of what sort of information we have in-house and at the Ministry of Education with respect to that project.
But are you aware that work has been done in schools through this provider?
I'm not aware of that, but it's possible.
It's possible. And do you don't have an idea as to the value of the work contracted?
No, but we are investigating that matter.
But isn't it that you all are responsible for that? EFCL? On behalf of the Ministry of Education?
This is before my time. This is why I'm doing the investigation, so that we can see documentation as to who instructed and what letter of awards were issued, if there are any. And we are investigating that matter, and we should be in a better position to give this August body the information.
But since your time, have you been made aware that work is going on in terms of this technology project?
Through the chair, no.
Okay. The last thing I want to ask is with respect to the school textbook rental, which is another responsibility and a function of EFCL. Would you say that there is some concern about the level of wastage with respect to school textbooks in schools?
Through the chair, Member Zakaram, I cannot answer that question because the textbook program is under the auspices of the Ministry of Education.
Are you
responsible
responsible
we are just the principal
for
agent to source the textbook.
Okay, so you are responsible for doing what? Sourcing the textbooks?
Yeah, to procure.
Okay.
On behalf of the Ministry
On
of
behalf.
Education.
Would you say that in terms of sourcing, that all schools have received their top-up supplies for the last 2 academic years?
Our remit doesn't go beyond procurement of the textbook.
Okay, so what's the value of your remit in terms of procuring textbooks for these schools for the last 2 years?
I don't have the exact figure, but a ballpark figure, I would say 2016, it was approximately between 18 and 20 million, sorry.
Okay.
For 2016.
And 2017?
2017, we didn't get any instruction with respect to the textbook.
When you procure these textbooks, you will have some way of knowing that these are the books that are appropriate to be used in the delivery of the curriculum in schools.
Again, to the chair, our remit is strictly to procure. We don't get into the details in terms of the pedagogical issues, in terms of why the choice of certain texts. Okay. We follow instruction to procure and deliver.
From your experience, the textbooks that have been procured, are they basically the same texts over the period that you have been there for the last 2 years? Has there been any changes then, or is it the same recommended textbooks that you are procuring?
Through the chair, at my level, sometimes I don't get involved in terms of the technical, the nitty-gritties in terms of the textbook, So I must apologize. I don't have that information.
Okay.
But I can obtain the information and submit it to the JSC.
Okay, because you see, this is a very critical and important aspect. You have been told that these are the books, procure them. And I'm really asking whether it's the same books you're procuring for the last 2 years, all the time. And if that is the case, you are not in a position to tell us whether all schools have received their top-ups through your procurement process.
Really, the Ministry of Education would provide that information in detail. The Ministry of Education would normally give us a listing of the required texts. And we would contact the publishers and to give them the quantities.
All right, let me ask the follow-up question. Can you indicate to us, of these publishers or suppliers, how much do you owe them? Have you paid them, or do you have outstanding debts? How many persons and how much money is owed to these textbook suppliers?
To the chair, in terms of the textbook suppliers, fortunately, the ministry for 2015 had advanced the money to us, so we were in a position to pay on the 2015 for the textbook in total. However, there are, I think, one claim of one of the publishers for 2016. There's a situation there with, I think, I don't have all the details, but there's a situation in terms of the delivery or the distribution. Because in order to get paid, you have to submit your the distribution by the school, and the school certify that they received the textbook, the quantity. And based on that, we would put forward the payment.
So the only thing that you're aware of is that there's one supplier who is in negotiation for settlement.
Yes, sir.
No other persons are owed, as far as you recall.
Yes, so far, as I recall.
All right, okay.
Mr. Cox, I want you to help this committee so that we can help you. Given, what is your estimate of the currently active projects that EFCL is currently managing? I'm speaking strictly on construction projects or repair projects. Just a rough number.
Okay, well, I can speak to the chair. I can speak from the most recent projects that we were, based on the terms of the instructions, we were given 144 projects to repair schools during the July-August vacation period.
And my follow-on question. In the current structure of EFCL, even within the recommendation of PwC, is the contract management, persons assigned to managing these contracts, do you think that resource is adequate to do the job in a way in which we put a focus on value for money, making sure we get the best value for the money, and also understanding that we're operating with a scarce resource in these straitened times? Do you think the EFCL has the resource to manage this within the context of those two factors, to manage it effectively?
Chairman, the answer firstly is yes. And however, there are some peaks and troughs. During the peak period, which will be the vacation periods, we are assigned a number of projects to be completed within a short time frame. And that is, in fact, it puts a strain on the resources at hand. However, during the lean period, which is outside of the vacation period, we have sufficient resources to sort of maintain the emergency jobs and the contracts, the routine contracts or projects that will occur during those times.
And I'm continuing in my line, because my line of questioning is about the capability of EFCL to really do the job that has been asked. Mr. Cox, I look at in your submission here something called terminated projects. I want you to help this committee and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to understand. If you have a project that's 82% complete, but it's terminated, what does the contract mean terminated? Does it mean that somebody else has been asked to complete the works? I need to understand, because while it's good information here, I need to understand, well, if you've spent 82% of 10 million, what happens?
Chairman, I think that question is very pertinent to this session, in that a lot of when contracts are terminated from observation, or these contracts, in fact, were terminated for basically two reasons. There was insufficient funds available to continue to meet the work done to date. This is the reason for the termination, and therefore no funds available to complete the projects. So a project might be 82% complete in physical infrastructure being laid down. However, in terms of the costs, in terms of meeting the costs, it might be 1% or 10%, because the contractors would be building, doing periodic billing or interim billings. Because of funding, EFCL is not in a position, or was not in a position, to meet these interim payments. So therefore, the contractors, suspended the contract for reasons of
suspension. Okay, you have terminated, you have suspended. So I want to deal with terminated. So if a contract is terminated, as you've described, for the situation that you've run out of funds, the status of the works, so what are you suggesting that, I want to understand what happens. A contractor does the work, it's 38% complete. Is it that we just leave it at 38% complete until we get money?
In some cases, what the contractor may suspend, meaning, job stopped with a view that, payments will be forthcoming. In some cases, we have termination where the contractor says, listen, that's it. I'm presenting my billing.
Termination is on the contractor's end, not on EFCL's end?
Both parties.
Both parties, okay.
Yeah. All right, so when you have the termination, the contractor would forward his final billing, and we have to negotiate and meet and settle on the final billing. That's contractor, our consultants, and they would agree on a final final payment certificate.
But this is inefficient, Mr.
And we
Cox.
don't have the money to pay.
This goes back to my earlier question about making sure before we begin the award, we have the money. Because what we've gone along a road starting projects and not having any money to complete them, and you end up with a whole set of spreadsheets here of terminated and suspended projects at various stages of completion. And that is not an efficient use of taxpayers' money. This is not about blame. This is just about stating what the facts are. It is the chairman's view that that is an extremely inefficient way of using taxpayers' funds. So let me ask a different question. So the projects that have been terminated or suspended, we have two sets here. Is there any plan? Is it that we're going to say, listen, when we get money, are we going to complete some of them, or are we going to just leave them? I would like to understand what is the plan for, because you've invested money up to a certain point to get some things along the way. Do we just leave it hanging, or is it that we prioritize? I have no idea. What does EFCL do now?
Chairman, just for clarity, in terms of those projects, I must state that we inherited those situations in terms of the new board and management. But I'm not trying to make excuses.
We're in go forward mode here.
We inherited, as I said earlier on, in terms of the model use. The models that I would recommend that you have the funding in a bank account in place, and then you issue awards.
Inclusive of contingency, everything.
Yes, inclusive of contingency. Without that, utilizing that model, we'll find ourselves in a situation like that, especially where we have a decline in revenue streams. In terms of what we're going to do, futuristic, in terms of these contracts, those contracts that are 70% or even 80, 90%, we are urging the ministry to source fund, be it by a cabinet note, through cabinet, so that we can satisfy all these outstanding payments. It may not be possible under the normal budgetary allocation for the Ministry of Education. However, we would still approach the ministry to approach the Ministry of Education, to approach the Ministry of Finance, to present a note to cabinet so that we can treat with those outstanding payments.
I have just one quick follow-up.
As a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, we are all concerned in having the completion of those schools, especially those at 90%.
Yes, I've seen there several at 99%, 98%, 94%
to increase
complete.
the physical learning environment.
I have a question. I want to be clear. When a project is suspended, does it mean that at that point in time, there's no more financial exposure from EFCL regarding the contractor? Am I correct?
Chairman, the answer is yes, there are financial consideration, exposure there, in that the consultant may not suspend, and the consultant will continue, although there is no project to manage.
So they're earning money without doing the work?
Yes, and we have this situation where suspension means that we are not terminating, but we are, and then the security of the resources, the physical resources on the project or the site. These are some consideration. Sometimes it's better that the contractor stays on the job to protect looting and vandalism of the plant.
This is troubling because it's an extremely inefficient way to operate. We start projects, we don't finish them, and then we're running up monies to the contractors, and then we still have to probably pay them more to finish the job. So that it's very likely that the beginning cost for a project, when you get the total cost, it may be a multiple of the initial cost. And yes, that doesn't do justice to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly in this economic environment. All right, the chairman will stop there. I have Senator Mark, who requested the floor. Senator Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cox, I know that many of us are overwhelmed with our workload, so it could have been a case of genuine oversight on your part. But when my colleague, Mr. Karim, asked a short while ago whether we had any outstanding payments for the textbook suppliers, you said apart from one, everything seemed to be okay. Well, I just want to remind you, based on your own submission to us, October 2017, there's an outstanding amount of $9.4 million, and there are 12 suppliers involved, with the highest outstanding amount owed to Mohammed Bookstore at $6.4 million. So as I said, we are sometimes overwhelmed with our work, and I don't think that you will mislead in our committee. But I'm saying for the record that you have submitted that there is some $9.4 million outstanding, and this is a submission that was made by the Education Facilities Company, October 2017, and there's no, it is page 10. So could you confirm if this is so that my record would coincide with your record?
Through the chair, Senator Mark, I would confirm the outstanding at that point in time. However, subsequent to that, I know we received monies from the Ministry of Education in the vicinity of 11 million, which should, reduce that amount. I will, however, make the submission to this August body in terms of the current state.
Okay. So what you would have submitted in October was correct, but you're saying subsequent to this submission, you have received funding, which should clear this backlog.
For the records, to the chair, yes, Senator Mark.
And would you be kind enough to make available to the secretary the final accounts in terms of outstanding?
Yes, to the chair, Senator Mark, I will do that.
Thank you very much. So he's confirming that this is correct, but at the time, it was correct. But since then, we have had some changes. The second question, Mr. Chairman, and maybe I'll ask the Permanent Secretary and the Chairman of EFCL. Madam Permanent Secretary, I was alarmed a short while ago when Mr. Cox, I think it was not Mr. Cox, the Chairman repeated a number that my colleague asked earlier. And I'm just trying to clarify again. One contractor was given 58 contracts at a value of $900 million. Is that a fact?
Through the chair, Member Mark. That's what we have in litigation with that contractor.
With that contractor?
With that contractor.
So one contractor is claiming via litigation that he or his company,
he did work for 58
projects that he properly received.
Yeah, well.
Or was he's claiming that?
Claiming, yes, correct.
Would you want to share with us the name of this contractor?
Could you, I sense some hesitation. On this issue, what I've tried to do is to try to not personalize or call out anyone. So could you provide that information in writing? Also details of the contracts, each contract, when it was awarded, whether it was fully completed, and all and the current status, so that you could provide that in writing to the committee.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Senator Mark?
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, you wanted to speak, Mr. Vasquez?
No, I said I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, I was just adding to what the chairman said. The period of time that the contractor is claiming, these 58 contracts would have been awarded between what period and what period? Could you provide that in writing as well for us?
Yes, I will.
Yeah. And what? And the purpose? Yeah. Yes, okay. Let me just ask another question, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry Mr. Cox is not here. And maybe he would be the proper one to answer this. It appears to this committee that PricewaterhouseCoopers seemed to be the preferred auditor of choice of this education facilities company. I have before me where within a period of September the 1st, 2016 to the 13th of March, 2017, a period of, let's say, 7 months, Mr. Chairman, PricewaterhouseCoopers were issued, provided, given in quotation marks, 6 contracts to perform audits for EFCL at a value of $3.1 million. Could you advise this committee, Mr. Chairman, I know that Mr. Cox is returning, he can help us. Mr. Cox, as you are back, may I just repeat? I have before me contracts for auditing purposes being issued within a 7-month period, 6 of them to the firm, the auditing firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, at a value of $3.1 million over a 7-month period. I'm asking, how was this, or how were these contracts awarded? Were they done on a sole selective basis? Were they granted on a competitive bidding? How was it done? And as I said, it seems like they have a preferential treatment because within 7 months, they were lucky to land 6 contracts at a value of $3.1 million. Would you want to share with us, Mr. Cox or the chairman, what is the process of tendering that were involved in the awarding of these 6 contracts? And there's a 7th one, which you need to clarify for us. When there was a leak and they were brought in, leak of information, they were brought in to conduct an audit or forensic audit as to who were the whistleblowers in this context, and we are yet to be told whether the report has been completed, what was the value of that report, and whether that report could be made available to this committee. Mr. Cox, maybe you can help us in your own way.
Through the chair, Senator Mark, firstly, when I started in August 15, 2016, and at that time, these engagement has been ongoing with respect to Pricewaterhouse. As a matter of fact, I saw a lot of documents. Those 4 audit documents that we submitted, those were there when I joined the organization. To my knowledge, and with discussion with members of the management team, there's no evidence that the procurement process was basically a sole select. There's no evidence that an advertisement was placed in the press or selective group of consultants or audit firms were used. Okay, so I can conclude that it was strictly a sole select because there's no evidence to show otherwise.
Madam, Mr. Chairman, Could the permanent secretary indicate to us, given your understanding of the State Enterprises Performance Manual, is this in clear breach and violation of the State Enterprises Performance Manual as it relates to the awarding of contracts to companies, be they auditing company or other companies? Could you guide us on this matter?
Well, there are clear guidelines on the award of sole selective tenders, so there are specific criteria for the award of sole selective tenders. I'm not sure of the specifics in this matter, but there are clear guidelines as authorized by the Central Tenders Board.
Well, then, may I then follow up, Mr. Chairman, by asking Mr. Cox and Mr. Vasquez whether they can provide this committee in writing the criteria consistent with the State Enterprises Performance Manual. Could you provide us with information as to the criteria that would have been used by the Education Facilities Company Limited to award PricewaterhouseCoopers 7 contracts at a value of over $3 million with using the sole selective process? Could you provide us in writing? And, Mr. Chairman, could Mr. Cox or Mr. Vasquez indicate us that the forensic audit into the leaking of information at the EFCL, whether that audit has been completed? If it has been completed, could you tell us what is the value of that particular audit? And finally, Mr. Chairman, could you make a copy of that audit available to this committee?
To the Chair, Senator Mark, that audit was done prior to departure of the chairman and the last board, but I was apprised through Pricewaterhouse. A billing was sent in to us for $47,000, and the accountants were asked to investigate who originated the audit, and through email contacts, and we were informed that it is an ongoing audit. It forms part of an ongoing audit. That was the email response. To date, we decided that we cannot recognize that invoice for payment because we don't have sufficient evidence to substantiate that or to effect that payment.
So that particular audit, for all intents and purposes, is a dead audit, as far as you are concerned, and the value of that audit thus far, based on your own inquiries, $47,000, has not been paid by the EFCL. Is that what you are confirming?
Yes, I'm saying that the $47,000 invoice, we have not paid that, and we have initiated an investigation as to the origination of that audit exercise. It certainly didn't come from me as acting general manager at the time, and my concern is that Pricewaterhouse has to respond as to who initiated that audit. And from the email response we have in possession, PwC indicated that it formed part of an ongoing audit investigation. I repeat, an ongoing audit investigation.
You have any idea where that audit investigation has reached? This ongoing audit investigation, where?
Through the Chair, Senator Mark, I have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I pause.
At that stage, Mr. Cox, your last set of comments is what continues to trouble the committee about the operations of EFCL. That clearly things have happened before you've joined the company, and then the supporting documentation you would expect that PwC is conducting work for the company, there'll be some sort of documentary trail to support that. And they've submitted the invoice and the document in the same way as which legal documentation should have come to the company alerted to know that claims have been filed in the High Court against you. And it didn't get to those who, so something is fundamentally broken, not wrong, broken within EFCL, and I don't envy you task of trying to rebuild it and fix it. Again, this company is here to work, but we're here to help EFCL. That's what we're here to do, to try to help you, to identify what those problems are, to see how we can help you and make recommendations, to put structures in place to fix those things that are broken. So I'm going to suspend the hearing here. I would like to invite Mr. Vasquez to give us a brief closing comment before we begin to wrap up.
Through the chair, would it be possible I could pass that on to our director, Mr. Gonzalez?
Certainly.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of your committee. On behalf of the chairman, the board, management, and staff of EFCL, I wish to express profound gratitude for this opportunity to account to the Parliament and by extension the people of Trinidad and Tobago for the opportunity to give an account of the management of this state enterprise. This is by no means an easy task, but we take this responsibility with solemn humility and an enduring resolve to do right and to restore EFCL to an institution that we can all be proud of, a company that subscribes to the principles of good corporate governance. After all, the success of EFCL is pivotal to the success of an efficient education system in Trinidad and Tobago, and we remain committed to this noble task. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much from EFCL. And as I begin to close this hearing or suspend this hearing, two key words struck me in Mr. Gonzalez in your statement there: governance. And failure of governance leads to bad things happening in entities. It's not that people are bad, but when governance starts to go awry, the whole system unravels. That is well documented in the annals of corporate history, not only in Trinidad, but around the world. When you have failures of governance, all sorts of bad things happen. And those lessons should have been learned from the days of Enron, WorldCom, going all the way back, which was led to the evolution of something called Sarbanes-Oxley. I probably have a lot of history understanding how corporate governance, how important it is, and when it's weak or it's worse, it causes the entire system to go bad. So I like in your statement your focus on trying to make sure there is proper governance of the company. That is so important. It's a particular area of focus of me personally and professionally, but certainly of this committee. I want to also alert that, as I had indicated earlier, the committee wishes to give everyone who's been invited to come to this committee every opportunity to come and share their views and their comments to this committee. So there will be another hearing of EFCL at a date that will be advised. And again, the committee wants to give every opportunity to all who've been invited to come and help us to understand some of the things that happened in a particular time frame for which the committee, as you can see around the table, we have masses of documents for which we're trawling through those papers, and we want to understand what happened, at least get another side or another version of what transpired so we can try to be complete to the work that we're doing. So I want to thank the media, the viewing audience, and the members here for their patience in putting up with us. And I'd like to say that this meeting is now suspended. Thank you very much. Take good care.